Welcome to the Independent Artist Podcast, sponsored by the National Association of Independent Artists.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. I'm Will Armstrong, and I'm a mixed media artist.
I'm Douglas Sigworth, glassblower. Join our conversations with professional working artists. Hey, Will, I was, as I was waiting for you to log on to our recording here, I was on Facebook and I see it's your anniversary. Congratulations to you and Susan.
Thank you, sir.
This week.
Yeah,
Congrats.
it is our anniversary. I haven't spent much time on Facebook, so I just jumped on there to do some gloating. Yeah, so we've got a big day planned, or big night. We're actually going to spend time without family, just the two of us. So that'll be...
Oh, sweet. Well, thank you, Susan, for sharing him with all of the listeners today so we could get our recording in. I hope you guys have a great day celebrating.
She's working.
She's working?
Yeah.
She's like, stay out of my hair. We're doing our thing tonight.
Exactly. We can do that tonight.
All right. So how's everything going with you? How's this heat treating your process out in the studio?
It sucks.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it's awful. There's a reason we moved to North, and this ain't it. It was 98 yesterday here. As far, we're almost to Fargo. That's how far north we are. And yeah, it's awful. I'm lucky and thankful that I don't have a show, during all of this. We've definitely experienced all of that. Been on the asphalt during those kind of things, but I can't get any work done. So
I mean, it's tough for us, obviously, as glass blowers, because
my God.
Our studio is hot when it's 70 degrees outside, but when it's near 100 degrees, we have to get creative. So our time in the studio is before the sun comes up.
Yeah, I am looking at some of that, but luckily it's going to be back in the 70s tomorrow, so we'll be able to get a big day in. Hey, we shouldn't talk about, as REM said, we shouldn't talk about the weather. We shouldn't talk about the government. That's not what we do here on the podcast, but it is integral to what we do for a living. Mm-hmm. You know what? I picked up one of those mechanic AC units that just blows directional. So it has like a cool air hose, but it's still just dumping hot air still out into the studio, but you can at least blow it on you.
I know earlier this summer you were saying that the flies were bad, so you had to work with the doors shut. Are you at least able to have breeze going, or
No.
are you pretty much in a tight, sealed up container?
No, I got a couple of big panels in, and I unpacked them to try to work on something big tomorrow. And just ordered some new panels and just like a clean piece of paper. So I'm excited about that, but cool. I opened up the door and it just filled with flies. And these Minnesota flies, they like to land on you and just bee on you and just eat your sweat. They're just nasty little bastards. You
need to have one of those tails behind you like a horse and swat at it while you're working.
Yeah, I just don't do it. I just suffer in the, I just...
It's just tough.
All right, let's last week we did, or 2 weeks ago, I can't believe it's been such a short amount of time. Good Lord,
no
people.
kidding.
What do you want from us? No, but last time we recorded this emerging artist thing, and we had so many questions and had a lot of follow-up, and some
of them we didn't even get to. Right. I mean, we got through the list and we're like, oh wait, we didn't talk about that or that. And then we had a few more come in. So we actually have enough information that we could chat for a whole nother episode.
So that's what we're going to do. So let's, more you and me. Let's just stroke that ego for a while. Good Lord.
There you go. Well, hey, before we go into talking about those questions, I mean, there are some things I wanted to kind of touch base about the past couple of weeks going on creatively and that sort of thing, if that's okay with you.
No.
No,
all right, go for it. All right,
not.
No more.
Well, I just want to say that since yesterday, I have just been kind of reeling about, the loss of Sinead O'Connor. I don't know if she's one of your favorites or not, but she certainly has made a difference in my life.
Man, I'm sorry to hear that. That was really a big bummer. I never was a big fan, but I was that Prince song that she did, Nothing Compares to You, was all over the radio airwaves, and I was such a snotty. I don't like that.
Well, I agree. I understand, because that wasn't the song that hooked me with her. In fact, I thought, that was really overplayed and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it was a great
brilliant track.
Yeah, but I guess when she kind of came onto my radar, which everybody's been talking about for the last 24 hours, was when she ripped up that picture of the Pope on SNL, and they're like, oh, she ruined her career and all this stuff. Well, that was right when I was in college and starting to, kind of form different opinions than the tribe that raised me.
Sure.
And I grew up in a very strong Catholic family. My parents both come from very large families. They both have like 10 and 12 kids,
Right.
and every one of them is Catholic. And it was in my college years when I really started to develop my own thoughts towards Catholicism.
So you're what you're saying is that you're swinging from weather and I said no politics, and you're going into Catholicism. That's what we're touching on today.
I seriously am, because, it really shaped me. And
Yeah.
I remember when that happened, talking to some friends in college and saying, everyone says she's so angry, and that's what all my family would say the Catholics would say, she's just so angry. And then somebody said, well, maybe she has something to be angry about. Maybe as an artist, she has something to say about that anger.
Yeah, that's really interesting as far as like it's what makes a difference in our lives and what dictates even our our thought process and our art and it's amazing the different artists and what kind of impact they have on our lives.
Talking about mental illness back in those days, that was kind of like groundbreaking. And I feel like nowadays it's not any easier, but at least we have the ability to acknowledge and talk about mental struggles and not have it be so taboo.
Sure.
Well, I've got to say that lately, I've been kind of all over the place. I mean, the heat has not been helpful. My stresses, my anxiety have come in getting ready for this next set of shows because my foot is just not getting any better. And so I'm like been in my head a lot. And I just feel like as artists, how we feel internally really affects our ability to make work and to function and to move through the universe in a peaceful, easy way. It's something that we should maybe talk about at some point, maybe have a guest or amongst ourselves.
Yeah, it's a great topic.
What it's about.
Yeah, I mean, how we deal with our struggles is a huge thing, and maybe that's a great topic to bring up with another guest. If you guys out there have any ideas on how we could further that talk or ways we could bring up the mental health struggle that we all kind of go through from time to time, whether it's good old fashioned self-loathing or your classic alcoholism that you see in the hotel lobby. It just is what it is, right? I mean, it's something we all kind of face.
It is. And when it comes down to what you just mentioned about alcoholism, for example, I mean, those are strategies to cope, right? I mean,
Sure.
we all come up with things either healthy or unhealthy that get us through challenges, that get us off to the next show, that get us out of bed in the morning, whatever that may be. I'll tell you one thing that helped me this week with kind of getting in my head with stuff. Two things, actually. The first one was I saw the Shaun White documentary on Max.
Okay.
Man, he is an inspiration. I mean, I wouldn't say I've been a fan of his over the years. It hasn't really registered much on my radar. I mean, I've known about him. But this documentary, just about the extremes he put himself into to achieve his goals, are just so crazy. And I have to say that as an art fair artist, I can relate on some level. The risk is so high out there for what we do.
It is. And we talk about that calculated risk all of the time. And, whether it was facing, traffic accidents or even when we faced COVID, it was all just part of the calculated risk. And that does have a tendency to take a toll.
I mean, I feel like the financial struggle or the financial hole that we got ourselves into starting this, and from time to time we find ourselves in again, you have to have kind of a strong mental core to be able to weather those, to be able to weather that force or that tension that you're pushing up against. But,
you do. You really do.
And then the other thing I wanted to say is, how sometimes Facebook can or social media can kind of be that doom scrolling thing that takes you, in a downward spiral.
Right.
I actually had something come across my feed. The algorithms must have knew I needed a little pick me up because Jeff Goldblum came across me a video of him. Have you ever heard the video of him quoting George Bernard Shaw?
No.
This quote is brilliant. I think it's brilliant. And it totally it gave me the pep talk I needed, and it kind of got me out of my head. And if you'll indulge me, it's kind of a long one, but I'd like to read it for the for the episode here. So George Bernard Shaw, playwright, he's also, I would say, kind of a philosopher and an intellectual. Yeah. And so here's his quote. He says, "This is the true joy in life, being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one. Being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it what I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle for me. It is a sort of splendid torch that I have to hold on to for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations.
That's amazing. I mean, how applicable is that to us and what we do?
It totally got me out of that, like, wanting just to sit down in the middle of my studio and just not move anymore and just be like, fuck this, you know?
Right.
I'm sick of standing on this foot that hurts. It's been a little bit of a rough couple of weeks here.
It's funny you were talking about the mental health and the women's rights and Sinead O'Connor, and I did have something to bring into. I saw Barbie yesterday.
Okay, I saw that too. Loved it.
It was too hot to work, so we went to see Barbie, and I thought it was hilarious that apparently there are people that have problems with it, because it really is just like, it's just kind of a power women movie. Which I didn't expect. I thought it was hilarious, and it's just a good time. So
I did not think it was going to have a message. You know what I mean? I didn't think. I thought it was just going to be kind of this farce,
right? And
it was, but it had a point.
Yeah, and it was hilarious. So I really enjoyed that. So there's my recommendation for. We will go see Oppenheimer, but we had the kids, and we did not want to. It's funny though; it didn't seem like the kind of movie you want to have like a little girl's birthday party.
No,
but that's what was in the theater for us. It was like a packed house, and there were like 2 or 3 little girl birthday parties.
Okay,
I was like, oh, hi.
When I found out that Greta Gerwig was the writer and the director and all of that stuff with it, I'm like, okay, this is going to be something that I wasn't expecting it to be.
Yeah,
so I was pretty
totally.
excited.
She did Lady Bird, and if you're fans of that movie, what was the other one that she did?
That's the only one I know. I can't remember. I would have to take a break
Google it
and
yourself,
Google it.
folks.
Google it. Find out what else she's done. She's a smart, nuanced director. I think she's awesome.
Yeah,
so.
And she's a lady director.
She's a lady director.
Not just a director. Sorry, that's a joke, folks. Put your pitchforks away. This episode of the Independent Artist Podcast is brought to you by Zap, the digital application service where artists and art festivals connect.
So I've started using the events list feature in Zap to search up some different shows to fill those holes in my schedule.
I feel like I should have something to say, but I wasn't really listening to you because I'm looking at the events list right now, and It's pretty cool.
Okay,
so you drop the menu down, and there at the bottom, go scrolling all the way, about third thing down in the smaller print, it just says events list.
That's right. All of the shows appear here regardless of their application deadline. You can use the filtering and the sorting to narrow down your search so that you can find that right show that fills your desired time frame or location.
I know a lot of people love that calendar. I like seeing the list of events. I like scrolling through and doom scrolling late at night. It's like online dating. They don't let you swipe left or right, but you can figure out who you want to date in the coming up year.
And speaking of Googling things, you don't have to Google things anymore, folks. You can just ask your good pal, Douglas and Will. So here we are for your emotional support and your artistic queries. Once again, we said this last week, and I feel a little weird answering questions sometimes because this is just 2 people drawing on our experience. And certainly there are many different ways to kind of build your own wheel, but if you don't want to reinvent the wheel every time, we do have some experience that you can kind of draw on. And some of these answers that we're giving you this week and last episode are things that we've learned from other people too. So they're not just our own words, but they're the words from our peers and our own mentors. So take it with a grain of salt, right?
Yeah, and some of the questions too, when I read them, I thought to myself, oh, this wasn't ever anything that I looked that deeply into. It's just was my experience. And then I would read it and go, oh, I'm kind of curious what Will has to say about it. I might anticipate what you would say about it, and coming from who you are.
This was hilarious. I have coffee with my lovely wife every morning, and we were having coffee, and hanging out on the back deck and just talking. And we were talking about there was one question that they asked that she took me to task for. She was like, I gotta admit here, I agree with Douglas on this one. And I'm like, okay, yeah,
baby.
I hear you. Yeah, but the whole thing where it's like, well, listen to your customers and listen to your client base when they're saying something. A lot of times they're trying to tell you something. And she was like, a lot of times they just have stupid things to say. And also sometimes in my booth, sometimes people come in just to be mean and tell me they don't like my work. So I'm not sure exactly how I could turn that into a positive, but
well, that's interesting. I'm glad we're kind of jumping back into that, because there was something else I did think about with that. And that is sometimes, Renee and I've talked about this, that people go out for one reason, right? They go to a show maybe because they're lonely or they need inspiration or they're looking for an event to do, but they're not, their primary intention is not to go home with anything. Mm-hmm. And so you might find yourself in a conversation with somebody that feels like it's going nowhere, but they just needed a friend to talk to.
Sure.
But there have been so many times where we've actually converted somebody like that into a sale, so you just really never know where things go. You can't shut things down all too quickly.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And sometimes, and I find this in the deep or like the polite South, like the deeper, sometimes like even at like an artist fair in South Carolina.
Yeah.
Where it's like a very southern town and southern city. And they feel apologetic for not buying something. So it's like they sound just like a B-back, and then they turn not into a B-back at all. They're just, they
want you
talking.
to excuse them, right? They want to feel okay that you're okay that they're leaving and not buying something.
Right, which is why some artists call the business card the get out of booth free card, because they're like, oh, can I get a card? And it's like, yeah, absolutely. They can pretend that they're going to think about it or talk about it later. And a lot of times they do want to think about it and pick up something later.
Is that how my card ends up in the porta potty sometimes?
I see your cards in the wind, my friend. When we were across the street, they come over to my booth and drop your cards. I don't know why. I don't know why that is. What are they
trying
doing?
To convert them. You're like, lose that glass postcard. It's time to buy some of my work.
Hey, speaking of your work again, and did you find there was something slightly Sigworthian in the Weird Barbie's apartment? Kate McKenna's apartment, there was a glass structure that was in the corner. I was like, that looks a little bit like one of your towers.
It was glass, so yeah, thank you for noticing that.
Okay. Sorry,
but no, it's kind of modeled after what Chihuly does with his squiggly bulbousy thing. But
gotcha. On to other things here, sir. Let's. Do you want to hit us with the first question of the week?
Yes. It actually kind of comes back to something we talked about last week about all these opportunities that you get presented. And sure enough, right after I brought that up, I got an email from a show called the Incognito Arts Show, offering me an opportunity to be a part of a show of unknown artists. It sounded very tempting, Will.
Well, congratulations on that, sir. You can't die from exposure if you don't expose yourself.
So it made me think about other types of opportunities that get presented to us that are either kind of like scams or the whole exposure thing that maybe we could talk about a little bit. So I went on this, I looked up a website for this show, which didn't have a website. It didn't have artist lists. I mean, so it was a pretty quick no for me.
Right.
But their pitch sounded like they were trying to figure out what an artist might want to hear so that they could, have a good old fashioned art fair.
Yeah.
And so anyway, there's that. Can you think of any other opportunities that people present us with that are really not opportunities that we should steer away from?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of these art books and things. Get your work out there. These pay to play. That happens a lot in the music industry, and that's where that kind of term comes from for me. There are a couple of different galleries that want you to not only exhibit your work, but pay to exhibit with them, like in an Art Basel situation. You have to be very careful with those kind of opportunities, because some of them are just groups trying to get money off of you. I'm always super skeptical of the groups that have us as their only source of income, or have the arts as their only source of income. So be careful of that. Be skeptical. There are galleries in Manhattan, and who doesn't want their work in a gallery in Manhattan when they first start out?
It sounds very tempting. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And it's just not the opportunity that you think it is. It's they see somebody with the arts and they're like, oh, well, you want to be here. Why don't you just pay? And then it's the exposure is not that great. It's just something to watch out for. If it sounds too good to be true, it's always too good to be true.
Yeah. There's this other thing too, where a lot of times like charitable events will want to base their whole event around like a silent auction, and they'll ask us to donate stuff for the sense of exposure. And whenever they say it's really great exposure because it's very wealthy people who are going to be coming. But in our experience, or my experience, I should say, anytime I've done something like that, the work is sold for pennies on the dollar. I've never heard from the person again. I mean, if they could get it for a third of the price for something nice to sit on their mantle, and then they go to your website and say, I want to buy something else, and they see how much it really costs, it's just kind of a disconnect. It's just not the right venue for trying to get your work out there to be seen.
Well, or, check out, like I mentioned on our previous episode, what other artists have done it. And then you can go out and actually ask them. So see who has done it in the past. And to be honest, the Temple Bethel show that happens down near in Tampa is one of my favorite events. The early part of the year events. It's one of my favorites, but it is set up similarly. Well, they take a cut. They take, it sounds a little bit like a pay to play, but it absolutely is not. It's a gallery setting that they turn their entire synagogue into a gallery, and it's a gorgeous thing, and it's a wonderful event. But if you just read the thing and you're like, man, maybe this is something, all these different things that are presented to us, that if you're skeptical about it, the easiest way around it is to check out last year's event and see who participated. You see somebody in there that or you see somebody in there that you'd like to know, just go to their website, check them out, and shoot them a quick email. And we are generally a pretty giving group, and like, hey, what do you think about this event? And we'll let you know, right?
Mm-hmm. And if a show is transparent about putting stuff out there, who's in it, like you said, and you can reach out to them, then you know that they are, it's not like they're trying to work really hard to get people to be a part of it. You know what I mean? It's like they're proud of who's involved, and they're proud of putting it out there. So think of it that way, that the marketing that they're doing for their artists is it's not like they're desperate. That's the whole point. It's something that it's like you want to be a part of it. This may be kind of obvious, this next one, in that is, but if you're a new artist, you might not know this, but we get inundated with, and I don't know how they get our emails, but we get inundated with requests to buy attendance emails. So like we could send out a mass email to people supposedly for a show. And it's like, oh, great, I have like 10,000 names that are going to come to my booth.
Right.
That is a big old scam. That is a big lie.
That's nothing. That is, and don't even email them back and troll them. It just encourages more of that stuff happening. So that's a quick and easy one. Be like, hey, you want to skip Old Town this year? Well, we've got the client list.
We've got them all for you.
They don't.
No.
Yeah. Also, same thing. There are trolls out there trying to troll us for hotel bargains and things like that aren't necessarily true. So there are a lot of scams, a lot of different emails, and the scammers are getting better and better too. So be super careful. There is also another one out there where it's a similar one that I found to singer-songwriters that kind of hack away at a living and I want you to write a love song for my wife or something like that. That's a scam, and that's now happening and doing a crossover into portrait work. So you have to watch out if they sound like a scammer, they are a scammer more often than not. So check that out. You can do a quick search on anything. But
And that's another good one, like we talked about, going on to any of the Facebook artist groups, and just before you respond, put the question out to the community, and maybe you'll get 10 people back right away and go, oh, I got that one too. That's, so then they can, it might be a good resource to hear back on.
It could be a good resource. It's also a really good way to have David Bjerstrom laugh at you. He's going to make fun of you real quick, and then you'll know, right? Then it's good.
That's good.
Okay. I tease. All right. Another thing, this was funny. I did go to a show where I had a gentleman and his lovely family. Like, everything about him in person seemed like like a scam. But I was like, I'm meeting you, and you just picked out the piece, and I'm literally shipping this to Saudi Arabia. And
wow, yeah.
he paid for the shipping, and
did he say he was looking over his wife's shoulder and she was admiring your works on the computer?
I mean, it kind of did. Yeah, she's the one that saw it first. I'm like, I am noticing that my wife really loves your work. It is our anniversary, and I work for he worked for a Saudi Arabian prince.
Wow.
And he was their music teacher. Fell in love with the piece. So anyway, I got the money. It's still
that was a real one.
It's been a couple of years. So.
Yeah, so sometimes they actually may seem scammy, but they are real. Right. So yeah.
Right. So do your due diligence, but don't get burned. All right. I've got a quick one from the same emerging artist that had questions last time. Where do you get your 10, etc. And this was about payment, how to take payment, and it's a dual question. Take all forms of payment. There's your easy answer.
They want to give you money, take it.
Yeah. You want to take cash, take cash. You want to take checks. Some people are worried about the checks, but I'm not. I take them as well. Just get all of their information and whatnot, and all the different credit cards. And if the credit card fees are too high, then you haven't priced your work properly. Credit card fees should never be an issue for taking something. So go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
The other part, do you, I will ask this to you, sir. Do you list the price of your work in your booth? And you have the title and the price and everything written out in your booth, and how do you display it?
Well, we used to use a method that I would not recommend, which was I would do little price stickers on our work itself.
Okay.
And at some point in my mind, I felt like it cheapened the work
because
a 3D
the sticker
artist.
Was on it.
Obviously, a painter 2D is going to do something different for how you price it. But I felt like having like a little handwritten sticker or even a printed out sticker on the actual work itself, it cheapened it. It made it look like a product. Okay. So I use a labeler. And I print out a price and I mount it on foam core, and I put either it mounted to the wall next to the item if it's a hanging piece, or I have it onto the pedestal. It gives it a little bit, it elevates it in my mind so that it makes it more like you're in a gallery, even though we're out on the street.
Right. Another way to handle that, if you do use the fabric wrapped panels, the kind of the carpet wrapped pro panel style panels. What's really nice I found is that quick answer to your question, yes, price it, because it cuts out so many of the conversations that you're going to have with people that can't afford your work or that don't really want it, because they're just going to ask you how much and you're just going to have to tell them. So might as well have it there. I like to have a little more about each piece. I like to write something about the piece and then I write the price underneath it. Another tip is that I always add the double zeros of the cents with a line under it, because you would be really surprised at how many people are like to make the, is this $320? I'll take it. It's like, no, it's $3,200. Yuck, yuck, yuck.
Yeah, you just give them the deadpan smile.
Well, it just keeps you in that. And again, that's another one that throws you off your game, right?
Yeah. Anything that can keep us from saying, yeah, whatever, asshole, in our head. It's
I don't even want to think it.
Yeah. Right.
So price it. Yeah, absolutely price it. Put the cents on there so that they don't say something dumb or get confused, and be super clear. I've also seen some artists that I just super respect people that we've had on the show do more of a gallery setting. Helen Gottlieb does this. Her husband Dylan does this as well. Dylan Straczynski does this with his amazing work as well, where you do a price list that's just mounted in one area, and then when something sells, you can just put a red dot. And if you're having a great show, that can really make things kind of exciting for the customers as well, to feel like they've entered a big gallery show. I think that's a nice way to handle it.
There's a lot of ways to do it, and you mentioned this last week that I thought about and wanted to respond to. Is somebody had said to you about, you don't want the booth to look picked over. If you sell out, you've somehow failed or whatever, that whole idea. Right. And at some point in my career, I was walking a show and I saw somebody who had red dots on the wall next to pieces. And obviously it was something they were going to deliver, so they were going to keep it hung. Sure. And they maybe didn't have other pieces in the back. And honestly, it created a buzz in me, like, they've got 4 red dots in here. There's 3 pieces left. And it's like, oh my God, they're hot. And it made me want to buy something, even though I had no intention of that.
That's funny.
And I think that does translate to the collectors, that sense of, this is a really hot artist here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not sure if I finished this thought, but the fact that if you got a Pro Panel, the jagged side of Velcro fits to that really well. So if you want to make little placards, you just stick this on the back of the placard and it just sticks right to the fabric.
Right.
So that's an interesting way to handle it. Since I talked about how dumb I was in wrapping my booth in wood and aluminum channel, it doesn't stick to it anymore. So I have to mount it to the back of the piece and have it stick out a little bit, which does not look quite as sexy, but
I'll turn you on to some handy tack. That's what I use, like the poster tack, and you can just stick it right in there and it sticks through the whole weekend and you don't have to.
Well, yeah, that works for some. Unfortunately, with the wood, I sealed it with oil, so it's got an oil, so it's really great in the rain. You can't stick anything to it. So
your booth looks really good, even though it's heavy. Will, it looks really good.
Cool. Yeah, it's great. No one cares. Yeah, no one cares. Doesn't help sales. I ripped my shoulder up, but
dude.
So quick shout out to our good friend Sarah Bean. Said she's the one actually that said if you sell it all, you've failed. You either haven't priced it. So she reminded me of that. She's like, I think that was me, and I'm like, that was totally you. So shout out to our good buddy there.
I thought it was somebody else who shall remain nameless. So I don't think Sarah was all that offended by that, or if she's listening.
I don't think you can offend her. Honestly, that's what's so great about her. Unoffendable. Oh, you know what? Here's another tip for you, Douglas. Real quick, since we were talking about the fabric wrapped panels and the Velcro, that actually works really well if you have lightweight paintings. I know some artists have just mounted those on the back and stapled them to the back of their pieces and just throw the work right up on the wall, like stick it up there on the wall. Also, when it's super windy, I used to put little tabs on the backs of my paintings, and it would stick right to the wall and keep the wind from flapping up under it. So that's another tip for you.
That's good. Good
All
deal.
Right.
Next, we have a question about somebody who's done art shows. They like doing art shows, but they don't want art shows necessarily to be their only funnel. Chris Dahlquist has talked about that.
That's exactly who I was going to bring up.
Yeah, about having multiple funnels. So maybe we can talk a little bit about other opportunities that can round out an art show artist's career or way of making money.
Sure. Do you want to handle that one first?
Sure. How about...
Or do you want me to jump in?
Well, I think maybe the most obvious one that comes to my mind is working with galleries.
Of course.
Yeah. So, I mean, you probably have more. I haven't worked with galleries for years just because I hate them. No, I don't hate galleries. I love galleries. Certain galleries I'd love to work with, sure. But anyway, why don't you talk a little bit on galleries a bit?
The galleries only work for you if you're comfortable taking 50% for the price of your work. So if you're comfortable doing that, if your work is priced at a certain point that you can take it for wholesale, the problem is you can't charge more for a piece and be like, okay, if I have a piece that's $3,000 and if you sell it to the gallery for $3,000, they're going to charge $6,000 for it in their space. So really, they have to, in order for it to make sense, and in order to price your work at the same, you've got to price it at, like, say, $1,500, and then they price it at $3,000. So you have to make sure, if you are dealing with galleries, that you have priced your work even at art shows to be wholesale.
You're saying your work needs to retail price match their retail price, yes?
Yeah, it can't be drastically different, or it just confuses your audience, or it pisses somebody off, and you're going to have somebody come and talk to you. If you're like, I bought this painting from a gallery, it was $6,000, and I see you selling the same or similar piece for $3,000.
It pisses the gallery off too that you're undercutting.
Exactly. So you have to have a good relationship with your galleries. In order, what I was saying is that in order to sell, like if you are going to be comfortable selling at galleries, then you have to be priced on the street at a point where you'd be willing to take half of what you're offering.
And that is hard for some people, because some art fair artists really fluctuate. They will go how the market will bear. They might change their prices from show to show. They might, change it from region to region. And you kind of have to have some sense of stability across your website, across the gallery, across what you're showing on the street, to keep all of the different people who are representing you happy.
Consistency. That's what you're saying.
Consistency.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Consistency in pricing. You don't want a collector coming back to see you the following year and saying a similarly sized piece for much less. You're like, well, how come this one cost $5,000 when I gave you $8,000 last year? It's like, I do feel like and this goes for driving your prices up too, there's really not any going back, right?
Exactly. Okay, so we drifted into pricing, but let's come back to the whole funnel. The whole funnels, okay, the cool. Pros and the cons. So we talked about the gallery and how we would price with working with the gallery. My question to you is, with glass, when I worked with galleries, we did wholesale pricing, but we got payment up front, or we would set up terms. I know that 2D, when you're working on higher priced items, do you typically work on it sells like a consignment type basis? Is that how you work with most galleries, or do you work with payment? If they have it in their gallery, they pay for it?
Yeah, with big ticket items, I do consignment.
Okay.
So it sits in a gallery, and I don't typically stay with those galleries unless it sells, and I know it's going to sell, and I can find that out pretty quick. I tried. Unfortunately, I tried one of my favorite galleries. I was accepted with those guys. He sought me out and had my work there, and it just didn't work, unfortunately. And I really wanted to be there, so that was a bummer. But after, I don't know, I gave it like 3 to 6 months, and I asked him if it was still hanging, and I was like, yeah, it's just, it's just not the right thing for your space. So that was kind of a drag, but just be aware of it. You have an idea of how quickly your work sells on the street, and if it's not moving in the gallery, then be honest with those guys and keep up. It's tricky. Look at the artists that are there, and you can always ask people, hey, what is your experience with this gallery? Do they pay on time?
Right.
Do they, have you ever shown up at the gallery and had a painting not there, and ask them about it? And it's like, do they show your work? You have to have a very honest working relationship. And luckily I've had that with a couple of galleries that I've worked with. Okay.
So that's galleries, right? So the pros and cons with galleries, what would you say?
Pros are they sell it for you. And the more I've had galleries, the more I've felt, and my galleries maybe wouldn't like hearing this, but they always want you to share your mailing list. They want you to share your things. I don't really do it that way. I kind of let them take care of their own people, and I'm super helpful as far as like if they want to talk to a client, hey, can I Zoom you in and we talk about this piece? But when they're like, send us your mailing list, I'm like, no, that's mine. You use yours. I've already. I don't. Why? These are the people that are going to come talk to me at shows. Why would I share that? So
that is definitely another con, in the sense that some galleries don't want you even doing shows near them. They kind of want their little nexus of who their people are,
Great point.
That's just something to think about if you're going to work with galleries.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said that, because that was the last point I was going to make when you mentioned that. Look, be especially careful. If you see a gallery that you create a relationship with that comes to see you, they discover you at a show, and then they want you to sign their paperwork. Some of those things have a almost like a do not compete clause in those galleries.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it's called, what is it called?
Not in my backyard.
Yeah, kind of, right? I mean, it's like an exclusivity. And so, I mean, and that makes sense if it's like you don't want to have your work 3 blocks away and competing with their competitors, but you have to make sure that it's written so that you're like, look, I'm coming back to this show. I'm showing here, here, and here. And so they all know that about me, that I'm going to be coming back to these shows, unless you just feel strongly enough about the gallery that, that they're making it up. And it's like, look, you're going to make me X amount of dollars in 3 days like this show is. Cause if you're not, then I'm not signing this. So make sure you're careful with the wording.
For sure. All right. Another kind of funnel that people look to is online. So you've got like social media, you've got website.
Never heard of it. Not sure.
Never. No.
I don't know. What are you talking about?
Yeah, but I hate online. I mean, how do you feel about online?
I mean, I don't hate it. I like. I do reproductions, so I've got those. So sometimes I get these little gift sales that come through, and I'm like, it's work that I don't have to I don't have to think about again.
Sure.
So it can make money for me. Yeah.
The order comes in, boom, out they go.
Right. And if you get to a certain place and you can have somebody else do it for you, then go for it. Who cares, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that? Do you feel like if people have reproductions and they're selling them and they have somebody else ship them for them, do you feel like that's all of a sudden are you cutting into production gallery mode, or are you what kind of line do the Sigworths walk on that?
I guess I haven't ever formed an opinion on it, just because it's such a different medium than what we do. There's no way I can have a shelf full of stuff that is a photocopy of, or I'm just, that's probably not the right word, but it's a what's that?
F you, Sigworth. Call my stuff a photocopy. It is.
Yeah.
Right.
Nothing that I can press a button and have, something that is made for me based on what I've already done. So I guess I don't mind if it's a 2D artist and that's their thing and it's online. It's not like it's at a show where we're like kind of all on equal footing sort of thing. I feel like three-dimensional glass is super hard to translate in photographs or in a video or on photos or whatever.
Sure.
So I feel like our website doesn't do it justice. And I also feel like when I do use social media for selling our work, it's more like a portfolio because when I'm in my booth, I can't show when I do installations because the booth is a smaller footprint.
Right.
But then people can, like, if they like what we do, go to our Instagram, they might be able then to see some bigger projects and get ideas or inspired for other opportunities. So I do think it's important.
I do too. I very rarely sell to somebody that hasn't seen me in person. That's just stumbling across my website and buy something. I feel like I never almost.
Me either.
Unless they've seen me in person. It's an in-person business. So that's the whole reason to get out and do new shows and new markets and try to experiment. So, all right. Yeah. That
any other funnels you can think of that are good for people?
Let's see. I mean, the really shows online. So shows and
teaching
in-person.
People do workshops and teach other artists or people who want to dabble. Teach that kind of thing.
Chris Dahlquist is great about that. Marjolaine Vanderhart, both of those artists we had on the first season. Those folks are really good about selling in person. The other one, a huge one, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, and it's kind of the Dahlquist slash Gaiman slash lots of different people that are successful is taking a notepad full of leads and having those leads that you fill a little book and you say, hey, this person likes this, follow up after I've created that piece. So I've done that quite a bit more this year and had follow up with relationships with people and establishing those and sending them pictures of new pieces and be like, oh man, I'm excited about this. I don't know if it's right for your space or not, but it creates a personal relationship.
That's good. Yeah, we'll come back to that here in a little bit, because what was one of the questions is about selling after the show to people and how to kind of keep those alive.
Yes.
But as for like other kind of ways that we can still be artists, maybe artist adjacent, and make a living, if people don't want to just necessarily do only art shows, maybe a handful of shows.
Sure.
So like I was thinking, you mentioned Chris Dahlquist and people who teach workshops, like Kirsten Stingel.
Oh, yeah.
She does these really awesome, like she sets up these like travel opportunities where people can go to Europe with her, and she'll teach, different techniques with ceramics and telling stories. So we shouldn't undercut our ability to find other ways to make a living, because we are creative in what we make, but then we can also translate that into other ways, I think. So
Sure. Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah. I mean, we've had so many different artists that keep different irons in the fire and have ways to get their work out there. But, the way I personally look at it is just those kind of those three, really. I mean, just face to face, online, and galleries. So.
Galleries. Cool.
Our next question is about insurance, and I'm going to ask you about that. How do the Sigworths handle insurance? Are you insured if a storm comes in, or if just if you happen to send a projectile through a nice little family and
glass projectile, not good.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you guys handle that?
Well, it's timely, actually, because I got the premium for our insurance premium for this year, and it like more than doubled. And I'm like, we're not insurance experts by any means.
I don't know, freaking thing.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so wait till it's my turn. It's going to be real short.
Go to your insurance agent and have them talk you through it. But these are some of the questions you might want to ask somebody who knows what they're talking about anyway.
Yeah.
So when the shows, like we'll say we need to have a certificate of insurance on file for you, what they're really looking for is a liability. Well, if you hurt somebody at the show, then there's a blanket coverage because of your booth blowing over or your work hurting somebody, that sort of thing.
Yeah, they're passing the buck because they used to cover it themselves, and now they want us to.
Yeah. I think I had like 10 certificates of insurance that I had to present this year, for
sure.
the shows I do.
That's typically. Here's my take on insurance. I only do it if they make me. Okay. If they have to show them the certificate, then I'll go and I'll get the little thing and I'll show them the thing, and I grumble about it behind their back. I'm terrible. I don't have any if
advice.
Somebody
do you do just a per show? Like, will you do like the $25 per show premium or whatever? Or how does that work?
Yeah, just with the aftermarket.
There's an organization out there that the shows often offer as a catch-all if you don't have a policy.
Right.
So just look at whatever the show is telling you to do there as an option. But yeah, there's lots of things, lots of choices out there for how to get your insurance.
I hate insurance. There's a jingle for you. I just made one. I just made it. I think it's a racket.
My dad worked in insurance, and he did say it's basically a big Ponzi scheme.
Oh, yeah, it's a huge racket, but they force you to do it. And so that's, if you're going to have to do it, then I don't know, do it as cheaply as you can.
But for those who take it seriously and want to kind of like weigh all the pros and the cons, what you're really looking for, there's a lot of different things you'd want to talk to your insurance agent about coverage. First of all, you're not going to your homeowner's insurance agent. That's not the same thing as business insurance. And like what we get is liability, in case somebody gets hurt. And then you get inland marine, which covers your artwork if it's destroyed.
Does it?
It does. Well,
you guys get that?
We do get that.
All right.
And inland marine also covers stuff like your display and your tent and replacement value. Huh. Now, here's what's tricky. You need to talk to your insurance agent about this aspect of it. And that is, some insurance companies will only, and they don't tell you this till after you're trying to file a claim, unless you ask up front, is we'll only cover the, what's it called, the material values of the artwork.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that is like that's the stinger right there. It's like they won't pay full retail value.
Yeah.
Our insurance company does pay full retail value, and maybe that's why their premium doubled this year.
I'm sure. Good Lord. Glass out on the street? Do they know what you do?
Of course.
All
of course they do. I mean, it used to be a $1,300 a year policy, which we've never filed a claim on. But I did have that in case of, let's say, $50,000 worth of glass and $10,000 worth of display blew down the street, and we needed to make that up in order to go to the next show or to be ready. I mean, that's why we have it.
Lots of people have it, and they love it. I've definitely had some friends get helped out after disasters. Me, I'll just have to paint it again.
There you go.
The way it goes. I don't know. I got screwed. So I'm a bitter, broken man, Douglas. I am.
In so many ways, Will. So many ways.
So many ways. I'll switch my Sesame Street character to Oscar the Grouch on this one and defer to you, sir. So that's all the information you need on that.
But the other part of why we have it too, and I mean, we could, I guess, a la carte pick and choose, but really the main reason we have it is we have a glass studio and things malfunction and we're heating things to 2,000 degrees. So we need to protect ourselves in case there's ever a fire. I don't think you need to worry about a fire out in your barn with a few, with some paintings leaning against the wall. I mean, right?
Yeah,
you don't have ovens.
No, but I'm, all of this talk is just going to karmically
put a bullseye on you.
Oh yeah, the gas can that's over there next to the lawnmower and the 102-degree heat index that we had yesterday and all this good stuff. So
here's how we deal with insurance. We stop thinking about it, right?
I'd love to. I'd love to change the subject. You got one for me? What's the new question?
Moving on to the next one. We touched on this a little bit earlier about when we were talking about the galleries and keeping prices consistent with the galleries, but there was a question about how do you price your work? How do you come up with a number?
Right. And I know a lot of people do things. I do it by size, and I charge the same amount for every piece that's that. Say if I've got a 6-foot by 4-foot painting, they're all the same price. Now, one of the paintings might take me 4 times longer. Well, I price it to the point where I'm comfortable selling that super intricate painting. That is made up and evened out when I sell the less intricate paintings. So if they're all the same price, people don't bat an eye and they don't question it. And you can even tell them, yeah, this one took me a lot longer, but but focus on the fact, I don't know, that you're getting a deal. I don't really tell people. I don't use car salesman language when I'm selling my work.
It really devalues the work, in my opinion, because the strength of the work is the creative element of it, And so when we start getting into how long it takes, how big it is, all those sorts of things that are measurable, I think we lose people on the fact. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I'm selling relationships too. How cheesy is that? But I am making relationships with these people, and I'm trying to get them to take a piece home that they want to live with. So I don't feel like I can hard sell them on that. I do know that some people do use sales techniques that kind of like, what's your favorite piece? Do you have a space for it? And it's like, I have some dear friends that use that language. And to me, it's a little hard for me to say it. I can't, I have a hard time feeling genuine if I'm using that kind of language, but
like I've heard some people even say stuff like, well, if you buy it here at the show, it's 20% less if you go to the website. I mean, you know what I mean? Getting into all of those business things. Yeah, for sure.
I've got one that I'll use that's similar to that, but we're talking about pricing, not necessarily, because we could do a whole show on sales, and maybe we will.
I think it's important to know what your peers, not to copy pricing, but to just know that you're in the right range, not to undercut your peers or try and shoot for higher, but you want to make sure you're not like completely out of the ballpark.
Absolutely. And I do keep tabs on some of my contemporaries and see what they're pricing things, and if they're and it's not just I definitely don't want to undercut anybody, but I don't think that necessarily exists because nobody's buying from me just because I'm a few $100s cheaper or more expensive. They fall in love with the piece and then they want to do it.
Yeah. What do you think about? I'm sorry. Go ahead. We were going to say that.
Well, I was gonna break down exactly how you can price it. Like if you are in the studio and you have clear amount of time and you can time a piece and figure out how much you want to get paid per hour. That's how I kind of started, and I don't do that anymore. I basically, what can you get? You don't want it to be super easy. You want it to hurt a little bit.
How do you also feel about if the work is too inexpensive, that is a bit of a turnoff to the collectors? Like maybe there's inherent value that we're losing by underpricing our work.
100% agree. There's an artist out there that I really admire that so undervalues his own worth that I feel like he's costing himself not just per piece sales, but he's costing himself any sales because people start to wonder. They're like, well, where's the value? I'm like, oh my gosh, this amazing thing. You're only charging $800 for it? And it looks like it took you a long time. And all of a sudden, you start to question it. Because there are people out there that are buy-sell artists that are artists. They're, they're
vendors. They're the vendors.
Right. But you go to these cheaper kind of county fair kind of shows and you have these people who are doing buy-sell and selling these trinkets. And they're like, if it costs $1, it was mass-produced in China. Whereas that's when people start to question if it's underpriced, they question the value. So don't sell yourself short.
Like the Zachmans were talking about in their talk that I had with them, the last interview I did, they were saying that the collectors are trying to fill in the blanks to make you better. That's where it kind of comes in with the irritating questions or whatever. How long did it take you to make that? And if we present them with a price that is like a head scratcher, like so low, like it's too good to be true, that pierces the whole bubble of the value in their eyes of who we are and what we're making and why, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we don't want to, for the sake of just because we want to make a sale, undervalue our own creativity and our own skills.
Yeah, I love that point that they made. That I thought that was a really good one. Yeah, the pricing is, when you first start out as an emerging artist and you kind of look around, maybe you're not quite established yet. Maybe you can put a lower price tag on it and see where you want to go. I love selling my work. I could probably charge a little bit more for it and slow down the sales if I wanted, but
that's a personal decision each one of us has to make from, moment to moment, right? So
yeah, exactly. And the same thing in stocking your booth, which we mentioned. And this was another point that somebody had texted me and made that point. It's like, can you handle sitting around all day and not selling anything? Like, what kind of person are you? What kind of artist are you? I have, there are plenty of people out there that only sell these gigantic, expensive things. Those are the only things that they sell. Well, you have to have a certain kind of character that is going to take to remain interested and excited about your work by the end of a long, busy day while you're watching and seeing all of your friends sell all of this work in their booths. And it's like, well, your business model is set up for big numbers. And sometimes those big numbers, as Aaron Heckenberg says, are round.
Come with zeros?
Yeah, you got to have big, you could have a great big zero just because it's people aren't in the market for what you're selling and you don't have anything for the smaller spaces.
Hey, so you were just saying about, and this is leading into another question, about selling relationships, right? They're buying a piece of you.
Yeah.
And that was one of the next questions is somebody's asking about that whole idea of how do I engage with customers? It's like, do I sit inside the booth? Do I sit outside the booth? Do I say hi to everybody? What do I do when they come in the booth? I don't want to scare them away. So like, what's your take on it?
Sitting? What's that?
Oh, I know you hate that whole thing.
I don't sit down. Sometimes I don't even bring a chair. I mean, I know that's not an option for most people, and it's starting to become not an option for my feet. But I rarely sit. I mean, I keep a side panel open in my booth, and I try to have, even if there's, if I have an inline booth and not a corner, I still keep that back wall open and I'm walking in and out. I try to make sure that my booth doesn't feel claustrophobic. So where do I sit or where do I set up? I'm all over the place, and I'm moving around, and I'm constantly talking, engage with people, and I'm telling them that I'm not, hey, I know you're engaging in the artwork. I'm not trying to breathe down your neck, but if you have any questions, I'm right here.
Approachable,
I'm just
making yourself approachable and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or I'll use people that aren't interested in the work as much as the people that are being super shy, and I'll talk to a kid about it, and I'll tell them something super interesting. If a little kid is looking at my work, then I'll talk to them, and that makes the parents more agreeable to me, and they're excited about that, but I might not be selling to them. Or I'll use like a teenager who's like, whoa, this is cool, and you can be like, yeah, this is just this, and you never know who is listening when you're talking, so you might as well talk to this person. If the other person isn't interested, then you can kind of tell whether they start to kind of warm up, and then you can seamlessly switch to the other person. But it's kind of it's like a dinner party. And you're the host. You're just constantly talking.
Well, I've always, before my situation with my foot this past 2 years, year and a half, however long it's been, have always been the kind of person who was on my feet, moving around. But I have had to resort to selling in my booth by sitting in a director's chair. And I've had to learn kind of different nuances. And I learned pretty fast that sitting in my director's chair inside the booth and staring out at people as they walk in, you can see the pressure that puts on them. Like, oh, he's looking at me. He wants me to do something. So I really try. I'm not looking at my phone, but I'm like, I may be engaged in something else. It's like they happen to come in, and then I'd be like, oh, hey, and kind of do like you said, the introduction or the let me know if you need something. This is my work.
I'm glad you said that. I think you do a great job of that.
Thanks.
By remaining seated, but sitting up high and not sitting in like a low chair where you're kind of slumped down in the back of the booth. You're angled in a certain way where you're kind of into the booth as opposed to sitting in the back and looking out at people. You're kind of out in the thoroughfare and are very like your posture is good. You're at the kind of the front of your chair. You do a good job with that. And I know that standing and walking and doing all this is not an option for everyone. And I think that's a great point. And the way you handle that, I think is pretty expertly done.
And I've had to figure that one out. It took me a while. When I was in an inline 10 by 10 and I had my director's chair in the booth, there was like no way to do like what you were talking about. It was so people walk in and they look at me like, and then they don't want to look at the work. They just want to turn around and walk out because suddenly they feel like they're like noticed. Like, okay, what are you going to do?
Right. And you don't want to be the vampire in the back of the shop either. You don't want to be sitting behind the wall and kind of duck your head out and be like, hello, let me know if you need help. Yeah. I mean, it's like Dylan Straczynski said, there's no way to sit back in the most comfortable reclining chair and sell anything.
Sure.
There's no way for people to take you seriously. You have to take your booth seriously. You have to take your work seriously. And that includes the way you sit.
I also want to say about that is it isn't so much necessarily about salesmanship as much as we've talked a little bit about this on both episodes, but really making yourself approachable and noticing something that might be nice to talk about with them that is aside from the work in the booth. It's kind of just like getting to know people and letting them to get to know you and not having it be so obvious that you're desperate to sell something. You kind of have to be back a little bit and approachable and friendly and all that good stuff.
Sure.
Authentic.
And do as I say, not as I do, because Camille Marchese was walking around the last show that I was in, and she must have busted me on my phone every single time she walked in the booth. Oh, yeah, absolutely. She was like, you're on your phone. I was like, I'm texting clients. F off. No, I wouldn't say that. But you know what I mean? I seriously do have clients that you do have people that are too nervous to talk face to face, and they'll text you after they leave the booth.
I've had that too.
20 minutes
where I've
later.
actually made sales from my phone while people are walking through the show to somebody who went home and measured and they said, I want it, send me a link, I want to pay for it now, so I get it.
Absolutely. I mean, it happens honestly more often than not. I've had people ask me questions about pieces 10 minutes after they've left the booth. They're like, I was really interested in this. And hey, here's one for you and your lovely wife, because I know you guys are a partnership. How do you guys handle photographs in your booth?
If I've had a conversation with somebody and they are expressing interest, I don't wait for them to ask. I say it because I pretty much assume if they're looking at an expensive piece, a collection for a wall or something, I assume it's going to involve a little bit of thinking and planning and maybe going home and measuring. So I always make it easy for them to say, hey, and feel free if you want to take any photos of anything with your phone, go for it. So I'm not concerned that somebody's going to rip me off and try and copy what we're doing. So
yeah, it's trickier with 2D.
Sure, definitely.
Definitely trickier with photography or digital too. If you have so many people have high resolution phones that you can take a picture of it. I actually had somebody on my Facebook page tell their friend, like on my Facebook page, posted, I took a picture of this guy's work last year and took it to the printer and printed it, and now I have my own.
Oh my God.
Like they just said that.
Right. Like they didn't even know that was a problem. Yeah.
Like that they're like, just save yourself some money and print your own. That being said, I'm still Mr. Take a picture whenever you want. I don't ever say, I've said this a bunch of times on the show, but I try never to say no.
Sure, right.
Like even if somebody asks me the stupidest question you've ever heard, is this watercolor or is this photography? And I'm like, well, that's flattering. I always say yes, even if they're wrong. I'm not lying to them. I say they're wrong by saying, yes, I can see how you think that it might be photography. I'm actually hand drawing all of this and my line work is such, but if you get up a little closer, you can see the brush work in my paints and my inks. And so I'm never saying no because I feel like the no is the turnoff. It's kind of that. And I know you've said detracting things about this guy before, but the Bruce Baker tapes.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a whole sales thing. He's made his money and cut his teeth on sales and teaching artists how to sell. I've come up on a lot of that stuff. My wife's listened to those. I think
there's a merit in some of the things he says. Some of the things kind of make my hair stand up on the back of my neck, but yeah, some of it's super cheesy, but I mean, there's so many great things about it, but I definitely do that thing where I'm like, I try not to be negative in my booth, or I try to be, everything's like a yes, or everything's like witnessed you turn yourself into pretzels trying to get a yes out of some of these comments, like the whole, I think you said once somebody asked if your work was decoupage. You're like, it does look like decoupage.
Absolutely. Well, it's a very similar technique. And then you describe the technique that doesn't have anything to do with decoupage.
Right.
Which is fine. I don't care. They're just trying to make a connection. So don't take the stupid comments too seriously unless they're, sometimes, like my wife pointed out, sometimes they're just trying to be mean. Yeah. And if they're just being mean, I think they're maybe more mean to her than they are to me, because I'm the big scary man. And
you might growl at them.
Don't make small talk with a volatile stranger.
Well, we get I think I might have even talked about this on the show, though. People will ask about, oh, you must love Chihuly. You must be inspired by Chihuly. Just because that's their only glass reference,
It is, right? Yeah.
So I try and segue that into talking about what we do without discounting or making it seem like that question was dumb, so.
Right. And that's the thing. I've made people feel dumb before, and there's nothing good about it. There really isn't. You're not going to get any laughs. And maybe you'll tell your friends that later and they'll get a laugh, but they're like, man, that was dumb.
That was harsh.
Behind your back. I mean, it's just not a good move. Sure. It throws you off your game. It can spoil, until you shake it off.
Right.
Just can't do it. So
another question about selling is an artist wrote in, there's certain markets that she does that aren't like the fine art shows that a lot of us travel to. And it's kind of local and kind of low commitment. And she was talking about how a customer came into her booth and wasn't expecting something like what she was showing, like the quality and the price was kind of out of the wheelhouse of what they were expecting to encounter that day, but they really liked it and they really wanted it, but they needed more time. And our question was, how do I convert that into a sale? How do I, get over that kind of unexpected situation that they're experiencing?
I'm going to use my own experiences with that, because I have had similar experiences where somebody just kind of, they hadn't expected to come to the show that day. They didn't know that the show was happening. And then they're confronted with a piece of artwork that is a lot more expensive than, they weren't thinking they were going to spend any money. And then they fall in love with something that that's kind of way out of their budget, but they can still clearly afford it.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Like I've done promoter shows where they're like in maybe a mall, like an outdoor mall. Same kind of deal. They were coming to go to Best Buy to buy a TV, and then they see this cool artwork that they really want to have, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of thing.
Yeah. So the way I do that, I'm like, I try to empathize with them, honestly. I mean, like, yeah, I get it. I don't, it's kind of interesting to try to sell, this museum quality work here on the street. And sometimes people come across it and you just tell them more about yourself, and you try to do it genuinely, and you try to do it casually. And you can't try to make the sale, but just keep talking, because they just want to hear more. And at that point, I feel like they just kind of want to know who you are. So tell them. Yeah. Because I've run into those people all the time, and I'm like, well, I don't really like showing my work. Typically I'm doing a handful of the top juried arts festivals around the country. And I decided to show in my own hometown. And this is where I'm showing because I want to travel a little bit less. And that's honestly why I moved to Santa Fe, because I don't want to, that's a very specific answer for her, because I know who you're talking about. Right. But it's like, well, look, this is the reason that I'm here. And this is the reason, I was hoping to meet somebody. I was hoping to meet someone like you.
It was meant to be.
I mean, yeah, you're trying to, there's so many analogies with like
dating, right?
Dating.
Yeah.
Right? Take me home.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about, like you said, if you acknowledge that you understand where they're coming from, like, whoa, if it were me, I would be kind of the same thing. I kind of had my head set on a couch or a TV, wherever I was going to, I wasn't thinking about artwork. And then just keep the conversation going about what makes you special, what makes your work special.
Don't say TV again.
Why is that TV?
TV.
Television?
TV.
It's
a TV. TV.
That was the emphasis on the wrong syllable?
Emphasis. Syllable. Yeah. All right.
Well, another question kind of tying into that topic about sales is, after a show, when you've planted all these seeds, or somebody is on the hook for something that is substantial, how do you follow up? How do you not lose that?
I feel like the more, and this is something I've learned from friends of ours, but I feel like the more quickly you follow up, the better, because once they're out of the booth, they're off. It's like fishing. It's super hard to get them to bite that hook again.
Are you saying like that day?
Yeah. A lot of times they'll leave the booth, and I'll even text them, be like, man, I was excited about that talk. I hope you'll let me do something for you. There was this one client that came in that they'd gone back to get their checkbook, and they came back and the piece was gone, and they were clearly pretty heartbroken about it. And I texted them immediately, and I was like, I've never felt bad about a sale before. That made me feel bad about that first sale because you guys were so sad. I really hope you'll let me create something special for you that's unique. And
the thing is, that's very genuine. That's not a lie.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
no.
I really think that when we communicate with people, whether it's afterwards, that needs to be the kernel, that it's a genuine connection.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. And so often you think something is you get their contact and they're like, yeah, I definitely want something. And you just never hear back from them again. And those are great people to just add to your mailing list and to keep on. Or you can be like, hey, this one didn't work out. If you're not ready for this, you can, I'm going to add you to my mailing list. And you can take that mailing list and go as in-depth as you want. If you want to take notes, like
Dolan, in her episode, they talked about how they create kind of a database about the collectors and what the collectors even talk about they might be interested in someday, and then they can categorize that. So anybody
Right.
who's kind of like wanting to know more about that after sale thing, that's a good episode to check back on.
It is, and I know the Grushevenkos do similar things, but are different. But it's all super genuine, you know. It's all very. It's something that they would say anyway to people.
Well, my thought here on this one is when Julia told me in our talk that
Julia
Gilmore's episode, which was a few episodes back. Anyway, she said,
this season.
Yep, this season. She said if somebody gives her their contact information, that she will follow up, even if she doesn't hear back, until they tell her I'm not interested anymore, or they buy a painting. She sticks with it. How do you feel about that?
Like it's dating. I do it exactly like I went back in the Wayback Machine. I only asked people out once. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I should follow up a lot more, but I'm kind of like, I send out that email.
You're right, though. Different personalities can maybe get away with that.
Yeah.
And
she's cuter than I am.
She's way cuter than you will.
Right? I mean, let's be honest here, folks. Who's bummed out to be hearing from Julia Gilmore? Nobody, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You don't want to like bombard them, but then you don't want to like let them slip through your fingers either, because what if they really are interested? You just either catch them at a bad time or...
Oh, I definitely add them to the mailing list, and I've been known to go back and be like, hey, I thought of you again. Here's a piece. So that's not true. It's not just it's not one dip at the well, but I'm not going to hammer people until they say no.
Right. Like every day. Are you interested? Are you interested? Remember what you talked about?
Yeah. I was taking a shower this morning and began thinking of us and our relationship where we talked about that painting.
Okay, I'm getting a little uncomfortable right now.
Yeah.
Okay. But
it's getting hot in here.
So the nature of what we do, we sell a lot of our work right out of the booth, cash and carry kind of thing. But from time to time, we maybe get 1 or 2 projects a year that involve designing and planning. I mean, we're talking big projects that add up to multiple shows. So, and in those cases, you kind of have to handle that kind of a collector differently than somebody who's maybe putting something in their house over their mantle or something like that. And I guess what I've learned doing that over the years is the first part is they're inspired by, what the artist does, and they want that as part of their project. Then the next layer under that is all business. It's all business negotiations. And I have felt at first like I was afraid, because now we're talking numbers that are much higher than what like you sell in a booth. You kind of become comfortable with a price range of what you can sell and what you can say and what you can maybe push a little too far and then lose it and be like, okay, next time I'll do it differently. But when you're talking bigger numbers, you kind of have to get comfortable with that sense of that there's value in what you're creating for them and have confidence in that so that you don't just give away the shop,
Right. And you can, I like to set it up with those big ones. I've had those too, where I'm like, look, the kind of job that we're talking about the price range between X and Z. If that's something you're comfortable with, then I think my next step is going to be to put together a nice proposal for you with, like a Photoshop proposal. I do those quite a bit. And,
that's a great way to do it, because then you're not wasting your time when they're really looking for something that is completely out of the, too low of a price point that you couldn't even consider doing.
Right. And you also are giving people the opportunity, like never give them everything, don't put that proposal together. Don't waste your time on the proposal if they're not comfortable with your price range.
Right.
Also, tell them how excited you are about their space and this. And you're like, man, I can really see my work in here. If you'll let me, the next step is going to be this, and you make it sound tantalizing enough for them to bite on it. And I typically like to say those on the phone. I hate talking on the phone.
Yes,
I
you
really do.
Yes,
I
you
just,
do.
I hate it.
You're like, can you text me?
Yeah. I'm like, why am I am I talking right now? What's happening? I mean, you'd think, but I just hate talking on the phone.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, when you're talking dollar amounts, it's super easy, especially if there's some wiggle room or you're really trying to get a read on people. We all have become excellent poker players,
Yeah.
and you can catch a read on somebody more through their voice and what you're kind of putting an inflection on certain things about the piece, or whether how you're coming off if you're actually on the phone.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can tell from their reaction versus, let's say they don't respond to the email or whatever for a while. It might just be that they were in a meeting, out of town, whatever, but we can put our own kind of paranoia on it or worry on it.
Yeah.
But voice to voice, you can hear if there's like a little catch or a hiccup and be like, you're like, okay, now I know I need to pivot. But you can't tell if you need to pivot from a written form. You just really can't at all.
But then you run into people that are like me that don't want to talk on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes texting or emailing is your only option. So do whatever you got to do. But I do feel like getting down to numbers and asking for money a lot of times, you need to try to talk to them.
Definitely. Now, I'll share, this is kind of a personal experience about one of our projects over the years. And I'll just put a dollar amount out there. It was $50,000.
What?
Yeah, that was a lot. It was a lot. Anyway.
God damn.
So
Sigworth.
So we are preparing for this project. And as we're starting to go forward, I woke up in the middle of the night one night, kind of panicked. And I'm like, I've got to have some kind of something drawn up by a lawyer that covers me financially in case they change their mind, they don't like it, what recourse they have if it's going in a direction they don't like, how we can pivot, make something different, do different drawings, just the whole financial part, how much you need up front, how much installments you need, when the final bill, all that stuff. Because things happen in these big projects. And you're like, if you've already spent that money to make the work you're providing for them, and then they change their mind and they want their money back, that could close a business on dollar amounts like that. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. My deals have all typically been handshake deals. They've all been like your deposit. I've never, gosh, I should probably have that in writing too. Like, what your policy is, but
like a non-refundable down payment or how much you get back.
I mean,
whatever.
like this is your deposit, and then the rest is due upon completion. Is pretty much all I say.
Mm-hmm.
The rest is due upon completion plus shipping.
And it's different per artist. I mean, a glass artist, we spend a lot on materials up front that then we can't use if it's something custom.
Right. Similar with jewelry.
I don't know if other artists feel like their material costs are so much lower that it doesn't matter as much to them if they lose a little bit of the creative period, and if they could sell it anyway. That's a whole different thing you need to decide.
Yeah, I mean that's a similar thing with a custom painting. The way I handle custom work, and not that you asked, but
hey Will, how do you handle custom work?
Oh, that's an interesting question, Douglas. Let me tell you. The way I handle it is I will tell people that I work, and this is true, I work from a photo reference that I create in Photoshop. So what the style of my work looks like. I'll send you the photo reference that I'm going to draw from. Mm-hmm. You approve the photo reference knowing what my style is, and we go from there.
All right. The next question is, an artist had written in about like personal struggles that they have with keeping their business going as an artist, and wondering, how do you actually know when it's time to throw in the towel and pivot or do something different?
From shows and making artwork?
From making artwork, doing shows. Like, when do you know? I mean, do you just keep going and just fighting through it and hope something will turn around, or do you go with a backup plan?
Ugh.
Is there any? I mean, it's so personal, individual, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. I'm sorry.
I mean, personally,
Gosh,
we've had lots of lows, and we have reached some points in our career where we felt like, I wonder if this is going to work out.
You know what? I did it. I did that. we did see the writing on the wall, and I had to do something different. So I do have an answer.
So you did do that. That did happen for you.
Yeah, I actually did do that.
Okay.
So my previous body of work was very much like autumnally shaded geometric abstracts, right? And it was, B+ to C shows that we do and grind it out, and it just became something where you'd see it everywhere. You'd see that kind of look everywhere, these blocks of color, whether it was on I mean, even the wall in like a movie set, or even like at Pier 1 you'd see it, and it was time. I mean, the writing was on the wall, the work was on other people's stores. It just was unoriginal, and it got really boring.
Okay.
And I had to draw from my illustration background and change my body of work. So that's why I changed the body of work when I did, because it had stopped selling. So if you have
was that scary to start to step into something new, or was it was exhilarating?
Scarier to go to shows and that you used to be making a certain amount of money and make a third of it. That was what was scary. You have all these bills and commitments. So I find a lot of artists to be very inspirational. I see people changing their body of work all the time. Dylan Straczynski's sculptures are incredibly exciting right now to see that body of work, and museum quality work that is really, really blows me away. He completely changed from his paintings, and it just, if you have a body of work that's not selling, when the deadlines for the next shows are, create 3 or 4 different pieces. You already have the shows lined up, so create some new work and see if it sticks.
I remember in Daryl Thetford's talk with you first season, where he was thinking about branching off into a new body of work, and he had a couple of pieces at a show just kind of like in the back, leaning against, and he saw the reaction, and they just happened upon it, and that started a new thing. So you can kind of introduce them into a show. I mean, you can't like show up and have that be your whole new body of work, when you've juried in with different stuff. But you can at least start to gauge people's reaction as you're pivoting your work, if it's gonna work with the audience.
Sure.
Well, I feel like we had a kind of a major struggle, and it wasn't because of the art shows. I mean, the art shows were what they were, and we had kind of a life pivot. Our son got sick. He got diabetes.
Oh, man.
And that totally changed our whole world, because this was before the Affordable Care Act, and the self-employed health insurance companies were writing exclusions into their policies.
Yeah.
And we had no idea that after he got diabetes, that this was one of those diseases they were going to exclude. So what does that mean for us? What is it going to cost? Well, we realized it was going to cost us about $10,000 a year for his care.
Woof.
And that was at a minimum. There was, if things weren't stabilized, there was going to be hospitalizations and stuff, which could double and triple that. So I'm like, there's no way we can do this on an artist's salary. And so I started investigating other options. I thought about going to school to be an art teacher or to teach glass blowing and figure out
insurance
just for the health insurance benefits. I recognize those challenges that people have out there, but luckily things started changing. Wisconsin passed laws that allowed all children to be covered, so he was able to go on state health care. And then Affordable Care Act happened, and we were able to keep doing what we love doing, and it worked for us. But that was our lowest of lows, with knowing if we were going to have to give up this career that we worked so hard to build up to that point.
Yeah, or him, just drop him off at the fire department, and best of luck, son.
Yeah.
Gotta go.
Too soon.
Now we got to do what we got to do,
soon,
right? It means
Will.
never too soon. You've met me. Oh man, yeah, it's hard. It's a struggle. How much more do we have on the docket? Do we have any more questions we want to run through?
That wraps up everything that we've had, sent in, and we really appreciate. I mean, some things you and I probably take a little bit for granted, just because we live it, and sure. As you and I start talking about about these topics, it's like, oh yeah, and then there's this, and then there's that.
This kind of segment and these questions are the kind of things that Douglas and I really want to work into the show. The more interactive the show becomes, I feel like the stronger it gets.
Definitely.
So please don't be shy and reach out and have if you have any queries, please don't be shy and reach out. Douglas, what's the best way to do that, sir?
Our email, which is independentartistpodcast@gmail.com. We will read those, and we love talking about it because it like you've said this plenty of times, will wind us up and listen to what we have to say.
Turn the key in the back of the giant Ken doll and see what he says.
Well, we have a lot to do. We've got a big show coming up here, so we should probably stop talking and get back to work. What do you say?
Get back to work. Renee's already in the studio. She's cussing you. So get back out there and help that poor woman out.
Yeah, we got all of our blowing done this morning, Will. And now this afternoon, we're going to be in our basement studio grinding away.
Gross. Have a good time with that. No, nothing.
Nothing.
No, I don't. It's not even vaguely tempted. Not going to say a thing about it. All right, folks, everyone. It's a pleasure as always. Let's get back to work, all of us, and we'll put a fork in this episode. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. There's some exciting things coming down the pike.
All right, take care, everyone.
This podcast is brought to you by the National Association of Independent Artists. The website is naiaartists.org.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. That's zapplication.org. And while you're at it, find us on social media and engage in these conversations.
Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified when we release new episodes.
Oh, and if you like the show, we'd love it if you would give us your 5-star rating and offer up your most creative review on your podcast streaming service. See you next time.